And now I have the great honor of getting to introduce someone who I respect enormously, who's going to bring on a panel of local government folks to talk about work going on across the country and across the world. So Tom Perriello is an American attorney, diplomat, and former elected official. He is also the executive director of U.S. programs for the Open Society Foundations. When he served Virginia's 5th congressional district, Tom made the bold decision to take a stand and support the Affordable Care Act. And while it may have cost him politically, it sent a powerful message to younger, progressive, aspiring elected officials like me. Do the right thing, even if it costs you. Tom's leadership at Open Society has been recognized across the world. And Tom, I said this earlier, but I want to say this to you directly. When Baltimore passed the Healing City Act and became the first city in America to legislate trauma-informed care, the implementation would not have been possible without the support of Open Society. Danielle Terrain, Karen Weber, Evan Serpic, and others have been key partners. Their early investment helped us leverage over $1.4 million of ARPA money, and their thought leadership and commitment to true public-private partnership has been critical to the work we've done here in Baltimore. So I deeply appreciate you and appreciate the organization that you lead.
Well, thank you so much. One thing you didn't mention is that I'm also a runner and I'm on vacation and I misjudged the time zones. So I apologize for being so casual in this appearance today. It's not a reflection of how seriously we take this initiative. Thank you for that introduction. We are so excited about the partnership on Healing Cities as not just an important thing in and of itself, but as part of this effort to show that Baltimore, too often presented as a tragedy, is a pioneer. It is a groundbreaking city. It is the first of its kind in the state and in the country to be doing this mandatory trauma-informed care, having over 500 city employees and libraries and parks and recs working on this is just incredible. And, you know, in many ways, this started with Karen Weber's great leadership of trying to change the school to prison pipeline and introduce restorative healing practices that with your help, Councilman, and others has really been able to spread across the city and become a model that our foundation's proud to bring to other cities around the country and around the world. We really are global, and we see, unfortunately, some of the same challenges in other countries, from anti-Blackness to police abuse, to the issues of how we do the difficult work of governing. So we're really, really excited again about this initiative. I was excited about that breathing exercise, particularly the part that said, don't beat yourself up when you get off course, because my attention lasts about 5 seconds. So really appreciated that. But most of all, just want to thank Danielle, Karen, Chris, Elizabeth, everyone on the team that's been so incredible, and to have a city so interested in the idea of caring and healing and restoration has just been incredible. And with that, I'm going to hand to one of our leaders on many things, including the importance of local government, when for far too long we focused just on the federal, and that's the amazing Elizabeth Guernsey. So thank you so much, and over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Zeke. Really appreciate, Tom, you being here and framing this discussion for us today. Before I introduce our panelists, I just do want to thank Karen and Evan and Danielle and Zeke. Your leadership in pulling together this day has really been amazing. And I also have just so appreciated learning and being alongside the previous panelists. The last panel was amazing, and just thank you all for sharing your work and your leadership with all of us. So I will guide our conversation for the next 55 minutes or so. We have 5 panelists, lots to talk about, with lots of amazing examples from across the country. And we do want to save about 15 minutes at the end for questions. So do be thinking about the questions you have. Feel free to put them in the chat box or the Q&A box as this session is happening, and we will certainly turn to folks at the end for questions. So I will introduce the panelists, and I think our tech folks will bring them onto the screen. So we have Donna Bruce, who's a member of the Trauma Informed Care Task Force based in Baltimore. Mary Lupian, who's the Council Vice President in Rochester, New York. Scotty Johnson, who's a City Councilman from Cincinnati, Ohio. Scott McKean, who is bringing in an international perspective, which we're really excited about, which is he's the manager of community safety and well-being for the City of Toronto. And finally, Tammy Morales, who is a councilwoman from Seattle, Washington. So thank you all for being here. It's really wonderful to see you all. So I'm going to kick it, my first question to Donna, who's based in Baltimore and who is a member of the task force, as I said, to invite Donna to ground us in Baltimore and the amazing leadership in Baltimore, and to talk a bit about the work that's happening in the libraries in Baltimore and how that has been a key part of the Healing Cities work. So Donna, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Donna Bruce. I'm a certified peer recovery specialist with a focus in family, as well as a registered peer supervisor. And I would be remiss if I wouldn't tell a little bit about myself before I tell you all the great things that's going on. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a person with lived experience from substance abuse and mental health. And what I did was I took that pain and I turned it into purpose to help other people. I became a certified peer recovery specialist, and that's through the Maryland Addiction Behavioral Health Board. Means I went through rigorous training, ethics, mentoring, education, wellness, self-care, all kinds of things to be able to serve in the capacity that I'm serving now, which makes me an expert on the panel. I joined Healing City. You'll see the sign behind me. I'm also a certified cosmetologist, and I came in as a cosmetologist doing hair for the summit and things like that, which opened the door for the grassroots to help other people in the capacity of just doing their hair, touching people, being intimate with people, and having the resources of being a certified peer recovery specialist. I connected those linkages together to be able to help them in other areas of their life, which opened the door for the Baltimore City Trauma Informed Task Force through Healing City. And on the task force, we work on legislation, come up with ways and solutions to help bring more about a trauma-informed city. So the legislation was passed. We trained librarians, we trained the media, we trained the city council, and now we're in the library. So what I do actively, along with many other things, is a pilot program going on with Enoch Pratt Library here, Penn North, Ground Zero, Freddie Gray. Everybody knows about that, right? And on this corner is a lot of activities. If you think about it, yes, it's going on Penn North. And I go into the libraries, I ran those streets. So to have a person like me come back in the capacity that I'm coming to saying, hey, things can change here in Baltimore City, but it has to begin with one person, two people helping someone else. So I go into the library on Tuesdays. I sit with people. I listen to people. The library is a sanctuary in the community. It's a safe place. So we have people coming in, individuals coming into the library, and it wasn't friendly at first. You know, the librarians didn't particularly know how to respond to a person coming in with mental health issues. So after the training, now they're a little bit more sensitive. They're more open, they're more welcome. And in the library, what I do is I connect them to linkages to resources in the community. So if someone comes in and they're on Suboxone, they want to get off of Suboxone, maybe they want to go into a treatment program, I can provide them with those resources to a treatment program. If they don't have medical assistance, I can show them how to go on the computer and apply for medical assistance. So now the libraries are a safe place here in Baltimore City, and we're growing. Like you actually have to see it in action because words can't describe it. And again, having someone who ran the same streets on Pennsylvania Avenue, and they remember that face, and they say, hey, I remember you. You're doing what? What is Healing City? What is Narcan? So we're training with Narcan. We're saying, listen, hey, no judgment here, but can I train you in Narcan if someone has an overdose? Can I help you identify the signs if you see someone with a heavy snore or, the signs of overdose. So it's just an honor to be able to serve in the capacity with a whole heart and not an agenda. So Healing City, it all ties in together, like to show up in all authenticity, ourselves, who we are, not looking for anything but to serve. That's how Baltimore is healing. That's how we're creating change. And that's how we're becoming a movement here in Baltimore with the peers being in the library.
Thank you, Donna, and thanks for sharing a little more about yourself and your story as well. So I'm gonna turn to Mary, or Council Vice President. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna pretend we're all friends here, or we're all gonna become friends on this panel. So I'm gonna turn to you, Mary, and for you to tell us a little bit about the work in Rochester, specifically around the establishment of the person in crisis teams.
Yeah, absolutely. So we in Rochester have had various teams respond to mental health, but we never had anything that would respond as a first responder. And unfortunately, like maybe in the case of Freddie Gray, it takes a tragedy to spur real action. And in Rochester, we had Daniel Prude, who was killed by the police. And he was experiencing a mental health crisis. And that tragedy really created the urgency around creating some kind of a response to this. And so we put together the person in crisis team, which gets dispatched by 911. You can also dispatch it through our 211 system. And there's a team of trained mental health professionals, and they did a really good job of reaching into communities of color and making sure that the majority, well, all of our team members need to live in the city of Rochester, but that the majority of those team members are from communities of color, so that they can provide the culturally responsive care that our communities need. And they will respond. They are there to de-escalate crisis situations. They are there to divert from the emergency room and from the psych ward. Often when police get to the scene, the only thing they really know how to do is MHA. And they unfortunately, don't have the qualifications to really know what is a mental health crisis and what isn't. And I'm not sure how it is in other cities, but the psych ward is not really where you want to be if you're not having a good day. And so we want to try to avoid that, which is better for the client. It's better for all of the systems. We're saving money. We're having our team evaluated at the end of this year to really understand the impact that it's had on our community, to fully understand, one, how much money we've saved, but more importantly, the impact it's had on our citizens' lives. And so we have about 40 team members and 2 teams. We have folks on a per diem basis, so that a lot of our clinicians have private practices, so that they can do that as well as be team members, and they go out to calls. There's 3 call types that they can go to alone that have to do with mental health and suicide that are not violent. And every other mental health call, they are co-dispatched with police. Police go in and clear the scene to make sure that it's safe. And then our PIC team members go in. And the police at first were very resistant to this idea, but now, we're a year into it. They're very cooperative. They're actually initiating calls, because oftentimes calls will come in that don't necessarily present as mental health calls, but once you get on scene, it becomes clear. And so they're very willing to call in the PIC team. They want the support. I think that the climate of public safety right now, officers are more hesitant to respond and to arrest because they don't want to do the wrong thing. And so the PIC team is there with the expertise and experience to know what to do. And I think that the goal is to expand to more call types, to expand the number of incidents that PIC goes alone without police, and to really be able to serve our residents the right response at the right time.
Thanks, Mary. That's great, and we'll look forward to coming back to you for some follow-up questions. So I'm gonna think my geography is right. I'm gonna work our way across North America here and turn to Scott McKean. I might have it a little confusing. Cincinnati, Rochester, and Toronto are close, but turn to Toronto and turn to Scott to talk to us a little bit about the work in Toronto and specifically around Safe TO, Toronto's new adopted 10-year community safety and well-being plan. So Scott, over to you.
Great. Great. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's really an honor to be part of the conversation. And thanks to Anne and Zeke for meeting with us over the last year and providing some of the providing examples of some of the amazing work that's happening in Baltimore and inspiring us in Toronto. And so I'm really honored to be here today. Just before I begin, I want to acknowledge that I'm actually presenting and speaking to you from the traditional territory of many nations, Indigenous nations in Canada, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And I live on and practice my work on the land, which is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The city of Toronto acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13. And so I'm speaking to you from Treaty 13 territory, and it's been signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Williams Treaty that was signed by multiple Chippewa bands. We often acknowledge the land that we live on in Toronto as part of our truth and reconciliation work, which grounds a lot of the work that we're trying to do with SafeTO. And so first I'll tell you about me. Not as cool as Donna, but I also have some lived experience in this area. I look respectable and have an office in City Hall, but if you knew me 20 years ago, you'd laugh your head off at that. A musician, artist, and also caught up in trying to fund my initiatives through alternative means. I spent time in certain backseats of certain vehicles, and I've been a system user as well as now being part of it. So I carry that lived experience with me in the work that I do every day. And, it's been a real advantage to me in how I do my work in the City of Toronto. At the municipality, I work in social development here at the City of Toronto. And over the years, I've built a number of initiatives that work with grassroots and community groups to sort of drive locally led and locally driven projects and initiatives. And I've also built a number of strategies now. And so the most recent one that I've been working on is SafeTO. And so for many years, I think it's pretty consistent in parts of the world. Communities, advocates, academics, the people we service the most are asking us all to think differently about safety and really to think about, expanding the definition beyond crime or policing and think about the well-being of people. And hearing about such the wonderful work that's happening here in Baltimore, there in Baltimore, I think you're on a very similar track. And in Canada, we do rely on policing. We do have many community living initiatives, but there's always like a sort of a reliance on policing when it comes to safety. And we actually, to the point where we put police officers in situations where they become de facto, responders to the lack of a mental health system or the lack of, community-led initiatives, and they're put in an awkward spot. And so we're trying to actually change the culture here in Toronto by, prioritizing a culture of prevention and being proactive. And that culture of prevention is really grounded in how we redefine safety. And so we, over the last, number of months, we consulted community to develop SafeTO, which is our community safety and well-being plan. And what it is it really is a comprehensive 10-year direction that has been approved and endorsed and adopted by our city council that is inspiring, like a paradigm shift, and is creating a pathway or roadmap for how multiple systems can come together to work with residents and communities to fundamentally think differently about how we think about safety and well-being. And so in July of 2021, we got direction in to do this. And so, when we're building out with community, they've told us clearly, like, we need to think differently about safety. They've also told us that we need to redefine what trauma means, not only to to the city, but to the system as a whole. And as a government partner, we need to be an advocate and a champion about not only becoming trauma informed, but trauma, like being able to be responsive to trauma and be specific to the nature of trauma, and to focus the work like on, to approach that work from a place of healing centered engagement. And so we've taken that lens of being trauma informed, trauma responsive, and we're now weaving it through our service system, which is how we connected with Anne and Zeke in the first place. And, they've also told us that we need to really think about how multiple systems come together. So in Canada, it may be different. I'm not sure about the local context there. So as a municipality, we're a funder and a service provider. And then our provincial government is a funder of a whole different set of systems that are supposed to come together and work together, but are often operated in silos. So we're working across those systems to be able to do that. And then lastly, they've told us that we need to really think big about not just like focus on, quick wins, but think big and long term and make your efforts transformative. And so that led to, sort of 7 goals within our safety and well-being plan, SAFE-TO, which are, reduce violence, reduce vulnerability, advance truth and reconciliation, promote healing and justice, invest in people, invest in neighborhoods, and drive collaboration and accountability. And they're all massive things that are now an umbrella strategy, which multiple things are coming together under. So we just actually in February went through council with an implementation plan. We're inspired by the great work that you're doing, and we're advancing, healing as part of our trauma-informed work. We're going down a similar path to the folks that were speaking earlier around, integrated multi-sector community-led ways to prevent gun violence, and have a number of initiatives there. We just launched an alternative to policing mental health crisis line, so 24/7 non-policing responses to 911 mental health calls. And so that's something that's just coming into fruition. We are launching a multi-sector data center so we can be data driven and advance that. So there's a whole pile of cool stuff. I'll just give you one last quick example about how we're sort of working with communities. So we have very specific areas in our city that are impacted by gun violence. And, so we launched a community healing project as part of this work. And we've been training young people, across the ages of like 16 to 24 on a number of skill sets around mental health and literacy and resiliency. And they become peer-to-peer trainers, and so train other young people in the city. And we're creating a network of young people that are like community healers in essence. And then we have people who kind of graduate from the program. So we created another element, which is it's called the Peers program. And we're trying to actually use that as an employment program. And so working with the corporate world to do what Altman did for you in the group up front, to do that with agencies and organizations and bring trauma-informed practices and mindfulness and healing into all aspects of our society. With that, I'll be quiet, but thank you so much for having me here today.
Thanks, Scott. And it's wonderful to hear about sort of the many different ways you're thinking about healing, and appreciate your acknowledgement in the beginning as well. Making our way across, I'm now going to turn it to Councilmember Scotty Johnson from Cincinnati to invite you into the conversation to talk about the work that you all are doing in Cincinnati around truth and healing and what initiatives you have underway.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Councilman Cohen, for we've had conversation, and to be invited here on this panel, great opportunity. But here in Cincinnati, we just recently made gun violence a public health crisis. So having said that, when we're talking about healing and when we're talking about moving the needle when it comes to trauma, first and foremost, what this does is this provides an avenue for us to be able to get resources to address the trauma that most people in society really don't realize they're experiencing. Trauma comes from a lot of different vehicles. And it is amazing that, unfortunately, here in Cincinnati and other major cities across the country, the trauma is affecting our young people far greater than anybody else. So when we talk about making gun violence a health crisis, it provides resources. And in addition to providing the resources, it made the city take a step back and take a look at the systemic issues that continuously on a daily basis contribute to trauma in specific neighborhoods in the city of Cincinnati. So now that it is an initiative and it's been recognized, now resources are being provided to make sure that we're addressing trauma holistically in the city of Cincinnati. Let's be honest, employment contributes to it, education contributes to it, homelessness contributes to it, policing policies and procedures contribute to it. So all of those vessels are under review. Serving as a Cincinnati police officer for 33 years and being versed in de-escalation. I'm a certified trainer in de-escalation. 23 years on the SWAT team as the lead negotiator. I'm trained in crisis intervention. Those are things that we're doing a deeper dive to look into here in the city of Cincinnati to make sure that we are tapping every available resource to look into, make sure that quality, impartial, equitable services are being delivered from our first responders. Mary talked a little bit about in Rochester, mental health experts going with the police. We've been doing that here in the city of Cincinnati we're probably coming up on 8 years now. And what it does is, as Mary talked about, it helps the police officers to be able to de-escalate because mental health professionals are already there. So what an initiative we are going to be looking into is having now here in the city of Cincinnati, those mental health professionals are available from probably 8 in the morning till 6 in the evening. But I am as the chair of law and public safety and governance, I am going to be looking into an initiative to where those mental health experts are on call. So if a call were to generate that may deal with somebody in a crisis situation, those mental health experts would be recalled, and we would be tapping into the police budget for the funding for these mental health experts. So it's not like you would be having to pay around the clock. The pay would come if a call was initiated for mental health experts to respond. So holistically, we got to make sure we're addressing it at all avenues: education, employment, homelessness, job readiness for our young people. We've got a Boys and Girls Club that is opening up that is geared toward just job readiness here in the city of Cincinnati from 12 to 19-year-olds. And now, if you can imagine, you have a young person that is interested in plumbing or electricity, becoming an electrician, at the age of 21 or 22 years old, you prepared somebody to make six-figure salaries here in the Midwest. So those are some of the things that are going on in Cincinnati. But collectively, I think as a country, we have to be willing to get outside of our comfort zone and make sure we are providing respect, number one, and compassion. If you're delivering with respect and compassion initially, that's your first order of business, to provide service with respect and compassion. I think we start cutting down and moving that needle to where we are able to address trauma, and we are able to address every citizen in the city of Cincinnati and Baltimore and Rochester and Seattle and Toronto with an understanding that if I need help, I'm not going to have to fear for my life. So those are things that we can do initially. Respect and compassion. Police can do it. I know police are under a lot of pressure. I did it for 33 years. But having said that, if that's how you respond, you get back most of the time what you put out. And if people see you care, they're going to care about the outcome of that interaction. But like I said, it's an honor to be here, and I look forward to furthering this discussion. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Appreciate your getting love from Karen and from me around respect and compassion. So I think those are important values to definitely bring into this conversation. So I'm now going to turn to Councilmember Tammy Morales from Seattle to talk to us a little bit about the work that Seattle is doing around healing and restorative practices, but with a specific eye to how you're thinking about it from using the tool of participatory budgeting. And we'll use this question also as a way to get into a conversation around the powers of local government to be able to do this work. So it's turn it over to you, Councilmember Morales.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Good afternoon. I think y'all are afternoon. It is morning time for me still. First, I do want to thank Councilmember Cohen and the Open Society Institute for hosting this incredible community gathering. I do want to thank Local Progress as well. I'm a member of Local Progress, and it was they connected me to this, so I'm really excited to be here. As you said, Elizabeth, I was invited to talk about participatory budgeting. But I'm also excited just to be here because this panel, the previous panel, have been really amazing. I do think it's important to say that we have not yet implemented participatory budgeting. And Seattle is really not aligned on what our approach to trauma-informed practices is going to be. We are somewhat divided as a council, really as a city. And so there's been a lot of interesting conversation happening. This is sort of contentious right now in our city. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about that later on. So in terms of participatory budgeting, I think it's important to understand how we got to this conversation. As we all know, in May of 2020, the murder of George Floyd really sparked national protests with calls to defund the police. Calls for justice for Black victims of police violence. And here in Seattle, we had protests all summer long. People were, communities were gassed, particular neighborhoods, tear gas, everything, lots of trauma in our community. And it really did force a conversation, a confrontation of racism and white supremacy in our systems that the government is built on. Also, a continuing conversation in Seattle about the role of the police in sort of perpetuating institutional racism. Seattle police, if you don't know, have been under consent decree since 2012. So there's a lot of things for us to be working through. So all of this was an acknowledgement of the systemic harm that is done to Black communities. We had many proposals coming from Black and Brown community groups like Decriminalize Seattle, King County Equity Now, about how to reinvest the city's resources in housing and education and healthcare. And so what resulted was through the budget process in the city in the fall of 2020 was an amendment that directed $3 million for a community-led research project to evaluate how we advance what it means to reimagine community safety. The result of that project was the Black Brilliance Research Project report that was submitted to the council in February of 2021. So there was several months of work talking with community, bringing in people who were typically not at the decision-making tables in the halls of power, and making sure that their voices were included in this assessment of what it means to think about different ways of community safety. So the recommendations that came out of that report included stop causing harm as a city, this wasn't just about the police department, but as a city, stop causing harm, create inclusive policies, follow Black leadership, pay for community expertise. I'm sure we all know that we invite community often to come and share their expertise with us, and sometimes we pay them with a $5 gift card to Starbucks. So a real call to honor the expertise of the people who we are inviting in, and to invest in thriving solutions. And so through all of these recommendations came the idea of participatory budgeting, and really looking at how to fund a reduction in spending on the police budget and invest those resources instead on solutions that really treat the root causes. Anti-displacement, home ownership, access to capital particularly for Black and Brown-led businesses, mental health, crisis response, mentoring and education, all of the things that can really change the community conditions of our neighbors. So that's how we got here. We are about to contract with an organization to begin designing the process itself. And then we'll be doing the public outreach for idea collection. That's how participatory budgeting works. And it really is about democratizing access to power, democratizing access to resources, and it's about repairing the harm done to Black and Brown communities. And really acknowledging that as a city, as a local government, we have played a role in creating these systems that have caused harm and caused trauma. And so it is our obligation to really try to start dismantling that. And this is one way that we will be doing that. So we've got just over $25 million in the city budget that is allocated for participatory budgeting. And the idea is to really engage young people, engage our LGBTQ community, engage those who are living unhoused, and cede some of our power as a city council to them to come up with their own solutions. Because as we heard in the previous panel, our community knows what solutions they need, and we just need to resource that. So I'll stop there, but that is kind of how we got here and what we're hoping to do with our new process.
Thank you, Councilmember Morales. And as someone who is fortunate to live in a place that has participatory budgeting, it is an amazing process. And obviously you guys are in the beginning of it, but I hope that it's amazing for everyone in Seattle, because it's definitely makes you feel more part of your democracy, which we all need right now. So I'm gonna kick this question off maybe to our elected officials. We have Donna and Scott who are in more appointed capacities, and I'm wondering, Councilmember Morales, you said something at the end that struck a chord with me about so many governments have been historically have been causes of harm, and they themselves have been complicit in things like white supremacy, racism, trauma, etc. So I'm wondering how you all think of your role from your elected perch as a way to use the seat you have and the power you hold, for better or for worse, to advance the issues and the causes, but with an eye towards how you really partner with community and how you think about pushing the agenda on healing practices, on restorative practices, on trauma-informed practices, to really work with the community to help government do and be better. And I asked this question both as a big question, as a partnership with community, but also then how do you push your fellow people in government who maybe aren't willing to take the risks that you're willing to take? Well, so the question really is, how do you work with community and how do you push people inside of government to do better on the issues that you all are advancing?
Yeah, well, so I think we really rely on community organizations, on advocates. In my office, we talk a lot with, folks who advocate for better homelessness services, more permanent supportive housing. And I do think that, the previous panel, Greg mentioned the need to partner for community organizations to partner with one another and bring whichever element of expertise they have. I think it's important to have kind of an inside-outside game. So there are the advocates who can put pressure on electeds from the outside, but it's also important to have folks who know what the inside systems are. So how does the budget work? What is the timeline for when you have to get budget proposals in? What's the legislative timeline? When is the last, in Seattle, fall is our budget season. So we don't pass legislation after July or August. So it's important for advocates to understand how those processes work and when it's the right time to plug in. I think the last thing I'll say about that is it's also important for me as an elected official to know that even if advocates don't tell me, they're going to push for everything, as big a budget as you can get. My hope is that they understand they probably won't get all of that. So what will you consider a win? And you don't have to tell me that necessarily, but if I'm able to push and get as much as possible, then it would be great to have some support and demonstration of appreciation that we tried for something. And I know that's not what advocates want to hear, right? Like their job is to keep pushing, but it's hard as the person on the inside to try to go out again, especially if my colleagues aren't necessarily on board, for me to keep pushing if I'm also from the outside, being told that wasn't good enough. So that's one thing. I think in terms of the role of government, we have participated in causing trauma. And, I've been on council 2 years. So I haven't contributed for generations, but government has contributed to under-resourced communities for generations, redlining, restrictive covenants, discriminatory hiring practices, criminally underfunding education, entitlement programs that stigmatize instead of lifting people up. We have these overlapping systems of oppression, and the systems aren't broken. They're working exactly as intended, and they are facilitated or have been facilitated by government for generations. And so I think we have a moral obligation to start to dismantle those systems and to build up the alternatives, because that's part of the challenge we're having in Seattle with this participatory budgeting. The idea is we're going to build up those alternatives, and people are saying, well, why defund the police if you haven't built up those alternatives yet? So that's the balance that we're striking. It's a fair point, and it's not a reason not to keep pursuing something better.
And I would just echo so much of what you said, Councilmember Morales. I see my role as being able to shine a light on what's going on the inside in the system. I came from the activist community, and so knowing how it felt on the outside to not really know what's going on the inside, not to understand the processes. We have a speak to council session, which is supposed to be the time when the community shows up to tell us how they feel about the legislation. It's an hour before we vote on it. And so, to really be able to say, hey, actually, that's the worst time to tell us how you feel. Here's the time in the cycle right after legislation is released. And oh, by the way, here's where to find it. And to just try to make it as accessible as possible so that people have a chance to know what we're doing and the ability to know how to use their voice in the best way possible. And, you know, we have a co-governance group that we're just getting running, that, you know, we meet with monthly. I have 2 other council members that are really aligned with this vision that we're talking about here. And we want to make sure that we're 1, informing them, but 2, checking the decisions that we're making with a broad array of community groups, and making sure also that we're centering the voice of Black and Brown members of our community in our decision-making process. I would also say that, you know, our city council is very interesting. I think it's not similar to many others where, you know, we have an elected mayor, we also have a city council, but the way that we evolved, our city council has just been passing things from the mayors. We haven't written a lot of legislation on our own, and we also don't currently have the staff to support that activity. So one of the other things that we're working on now is staffing up so that we can be able to support the kind of legislative work that this council right now wants to do. We just had a change in leadership, and the previous leadership was the president really ran everything. And it was very difficult for individual council members to have an impact. And that was my experience for the last 2 years. And so now, you know, things are opening up. The 2 council members and I that I just mentioned, we just introduced our first piece of legislation this cycle around good cause eviction protection. And so, you know, all of that we're trying to do is now possible, but it's also very informed by the communities that we're trying to serve.
If I can jump in real fast, I support what Councilmember Morales talked about and Mary. But here's the main thing as elected officials. We have to be willing to get outside our comfort zone and the box that has been painted for the role in which society and the system, as Tammy was talking about, the system has defined for us. As a politician, you can't say this. As a politician, you can't say that. I'm far beyond that, because honestly, at this point in my life, it's about legacy versus pats on the back. And I've been graced with the opportunity to serve the citizens of Cincinnati. They're not going to always agree with me, but I can't be concerned about how many votes I lose if I challenge situations. The citizens trusted me to be here. So I have to be willing to trust the citizens and challenge a system that, as Tammy pointed out, it's not broken, it's designed to keep people oppressed. But if I sit in a chair of decision-making and I'm not willing to challenge that system in which now I represent, then therefore I have no problem having the citizens of Cincinnati telling me, you have to go. But out of the cloth I've been cut out of, it's time to be, you have to be willing to challenge, and you have to be willing to be honest, point blank honest about where we are as a society, where we are as a city, and challenge those things that created the mess that we're now elected to clean up. Because so in a nutshell, I can't be counting votes while I'm legislating. It's not fair to the citizens that elected me. If I'm in this chair and the needle has not moved while I've sat in this chair, then I haven't done my job. So Scotty Johnson doesn't count votes. Scotty Johnson honors God that he's been graced to serve in this capacity. But in that service, what type of footprint is left that changed the dynamics for people that didn't have a voice? And that's just how, that's where it is. So we have to be willing
over here. That's some good stuff. I'm excited. I didn't mean to interject, but I'm like, yes, that's what we need. Oh my gosh, I appreciate that authenticity. And that's what we need more of, bringing our whole selves to the table. When you're at the table, what are you going to say when you're at the table? You know, are we going to just go with the flow, Are we going to set some change? Are we going to create some change? And understand that when the flow is there, it's going to be some opposition. But we have to say the things that needed to be said, because at the end of the night, when you lay your head down, you want to know that you did your job to serve your community as best as possible. So thank you so much, Council.
Thank you, Donna. I'm gonna actually go to you next, and thank you all for sharing. We clearly need to clone all of you for more roles in government, even though I know you're probably already overly taxed, but thank you each for sharing your perspectives. Donna, I'm curious, speaking about authenticity and expanding this work out, how you all are in Baltimore thinking about expanding this work to more agencies. So you mentioned libraries, but I believe that you all are thinking about expanding this work further. And so curious if you can talk about that and any challenges or opportunities you might foresee either with the government agencies you're looking to expand with as you do this work.
Okay, so of course, when the legislation was passed, the first people we tried to get with was, people that are in positions of authority. I hope to see the police trained in trauma-informed care. I hope to see that happen. So when they show up on the scene, they have some understanding of what's going on, opposed to just reacting. So those are some of my hopes, is that the police are trained, the social workers are trained. We train the librarians, even the media outlet who has all this authority and power that gives this information out will highlight trauma, what it is, opposed to a person on TV looking crazy saying, oh, look what this person did. But this is what trauma looks like. And these are the resources that we provided. We provided mental health. We provided a Miss Donna Bruce or Miss Tiffany Scott or a peer who's certified. And again, we are certified. We are certified through the Maryland Addiction Behavioral Health Board. We're not just a group of people that say, hey, we have been trained with lived experience. Again, took our experiences and say, okay, we're coming to the table. So my hopes, again, is right now we're in the library. And it started out as a pilot program back in December. In full transparency, I had just lost my job and I got a call and it was like, Donna, you mind going in the library on Tuesdays and volunteer on Tuesdays? I need to find a job. I don't have any money, but because my heart and my service, my heart is about serving and giving back. I stepped out on faith and I'm like, okay, whatever's going to happen with this, I didn't see this bigger picture to be on this panel in Healing City. It was like, okay, I'm going to give back to my community. So the hopes is to bring more people, to expand out in other libraries. I'm even hoping to get, because I'm a cosmetologist, I have a group of stylists that we're meeting on Saturday. And I'm going to have a nice meeting with them because they trust me. I've been in the industry a long time and I want to have a meeting with the stylists and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Can I train you in Narcan? So we want to, on the bus stop, I would like to see a red box on the bus stop where people hang out at, serving drugs, of Narcan posted to say, there are the resources for that. So, I just see hope and vision and a bigger healed Baltimore City. It's not going to happen overnight. We get that, but we have to be consistent. We have to keep the movement. We cannot just stop and give up because somebody give us resistance. Some resistance I haven't really experienced. I'm telling a story. The librarians was not feeling us. They were not. They didn't know who we were, why we were there. And I'll never forget I won't say her name, but she cried. One of the librarians cried and said, I'm so sorry. But the atmosphere have changed in the library. Now we can go in the back. At first, we couldn't go in the back. Now we can go in the back and get our own supplies. Now, do you need a room? Now, do you want this particular table? No, we're not trying to say, oh, we can sit wherever, so we go in and you can feel just how the atmosphere has changed. And people come back on Tuesdays just to see us. Well, what days are you there? Well, right now, we're just here on Tuesdays. So we need more days. We need more peers. And tomorrow, Friday, we'll be at the library giving out our Healing City swag bags right? We have 200 bags we're gonna give out. And we're just excited because not only we're inside, but we're right outside on that perimeter around the library as well. So you have one person selling something over here and you got us selling hope over here. They selling dope over there, you got hope over here. So, you know, it's just, it's amazing to just be a part of the movement. And I'm not looking for likes or kudos or anything. I just know at the end of the day, I tore the city down when I was running around doing my thing. Now it's time that I build the city back up by giving back. So when the doors open for the Healing City Steering Committee, and then to be sworn in by the mayor, I'm talking about a person who had mental health and substance abuse like running rampant in my life. You know what that does for a person to be able to say, you can also change. You can, oh, there's also hope for you. So now we need you guys that's sitting at the table to hear what we're saying and make it happen for us. You know, we ain't got that much power. We can just tell y'all, and we trust in y'all going. So thank you, Councilman Cohen, for hearing us. And thank you for the vision. And thank you for just, you know, having the idea to move forward with it. I'm gonna say this and then I'm really gonna be quiet because it's a lot that I can share. Destiny Harrison was a young lady, a hairstylist here in Baltimore. And she was murdered in her salon. And Councilman Cohen said, we need to do something. Can we do a scholarship? Donna, I said, hey, I'm ready. And we just was out to raise $5,000 to help students at Mergenthaler, which has a cosmetology trade school there. We raised we woke up one morning, it was $70,000. Now each student at Mervo can get $1,000 towards their cosmetology program to get scrubs, to help them be successful in the program. Not only Mergenthaler, we're reaching out to Carter High School because we want to say, listen, we're giving back wherever we can. We want persons healed. We want persons to be successful in their trade and their vocations. So I just wanted to share that this is, I'm excited about the summit. I wish you guys can come down Saturday and turn up with us because we're gonna have fun at Coppin State University. We're gonna be like, woo, it's over.
Well, next year we want an invite, Donna. So next year we want to come. Yeah, exactly. Councilwoman Morales is already sharing that sentiment too. But appreciate you sharing that, and also just how this is both systemic work, but it's also the individual work of working with people to change hearts and minds. And just thank you for sharing that. And I hope Saturday goes well. And sorry, we're going to miss it. So I see we have some questions coming in. We have about our organizers are going to let us go to 2:55. So we have about 12 more minutes for the panel. I want to bring Scott in, and then I'll turn to audience Q&A that's coming in, which is great. So keep bringing that in. I'm wondering, Scott, if you could talk about maybe one of your most successful community partnerships and how you're able to build trust and relationship with community organizations that you're partnering with on the work that you're doing, and maybe what do you think some of our best practices are for government and CBOs and advocates working together to advance this healing work?
Thanks so much for the question. There's so many I could pick from, but I think given the nature of the conversation, I want to use one in particular, and it's like community knows the answers themselves. And so similar to what Scotty Johnson talked about, Toronto also has declared gun violence as a public health issue and are transforming our way where we think about that. Part of how we got to there was, you know, there was a specific community where there was significant violence happening in that community. And we, you know, we were working with that community as we always would and pulling together our stakeholders and having community conversations. And, you know, there's always those like grandiose ideas, but a group of moms talked that in this particular community, there is a stairwell that led, you know, where all the apartment buildings where they lived were, and at the top there was a school. And they said that we can't walk our kids to school safely. You know, they can't go to school on their own safely because they're getting recruited to do, you know, X, Y, and Z. And we really just want to be able to walk them to school. And that was something that was very tangible and really important to them. And, you know, and so we started working with a group of moms, and we literally bought some vests with, the big X on it, and gave them some walkie-talkies, and we did some safety training. And then we brought in, the people to fix the lighting and cut the trees and all that stuff that the city would normally do. But then moms wanted to start a safe walk program to the school. So there they go, Mrs. Angela and Mrs. So-and-so, they just strap on these vests and get their walkie-talkies, and they start with 4 or 5 kids, and they walk them to school. And then they come home, and then parents are seeing what's going on, asking what's this about. And, the second day they had about over 30 kids, and there they go up to the school, walk them there, walk them back. The teachers are like, what's going on here? And they're like, okay, well, we're just walking kids to school, and we're working with the city and everyone else. And they're like, can you actually take these newsletters and stuff and let other parents know about it? Because we send things home and parents are finding out. Sure, no problem. All of a sudden, parents are finding out about it. By the end of the first week, they're up to 70 kids that they're walking to school. And the guys who were doing their stuff on the stairwell, they're like, that's Mrs. So-and-so, and she's got a vest on and a walkie-talkie. And so they just got out of there, and it was like, they found someone else to do what they were doing that didn't impact the kids going to school. And as a result of that, other parents started to get involved, started to have after school programs. Then they had a March break camp. And then all of a sudden now, in the housing unit there was an empty building, an empty part of the basement. And that's been transformed through city and provincial funding into a community hub. So by moms wanting to walk their kids to school, not only did they reduce the violence in the community, but they transformed it and brought all these other service providers in. And we were all thinking about all these complex, solutions. And it was like, you want to walk your kids to school? Sure, we'll get some vests. It was just, the solution was where they were at, and then it grew and blossomed. And it was just such an amazing story.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. Councilwoman Morales, sure, are you trying to get in? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that's such a great example of not only how community has the solutions, but the importance of community cohesion, right? Like part of the challenges, especially right now, we've all been isolated, we've all been at home, and we have a similar example in one of the neighborhoods that I represent, where there was a lot of gun violence happening in a particular part of the neighborhood. The Boys and Girls Club came, and every Friday night now they hole up on the parking lot of the grocery store. They hand out hot dogs, there's music playing, they're sort of activating the space. And now everybody in the neighborhood comes and hangs out there on Friday night. And, things have really, really changed in the area, and neighbors have reconnected to one another, and they say hello on the street, and they, remember who's there. And I just think that sort of connection is a really important piece. Like it's one piece, it's not the whole answer, but that cohesion is really critical to making people feel safe and feel connected again.
If I can jump in, it is amazing the power of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I tell people this all the time. I told them when I was serving as a police officer, you possess way more power than I do. Because collectively, they're over. At that time, there were probably close to 390,000 citizens in the city of Cincinnati. There were maybe 1,000 police officers. You possess the power. You possess more power than you think, because when you come together, as Scott pointed out, when you come together for one mission, the mission was to move these young people to school, and you accomplish that mission. Now you've got a foundation that, guess what? Maybe we can do some other things collectively together. That one win, as you talked about, Tammy, that one win there can motivate an entire community to move, to do things that they have the power to possess. They're voters. For us politicians, they're voters. So you have the power to determine who serves you. And the power of community, I think we marginalize that in this country. We marginalize. There's this perception that us politicians and senators and congressmen and mayors and the president, they have that power. No, Citizens United are more powerful than any other group that you can think about. And that's a great story. And I say, just moving young people to school safely
Yeah,
And,
I just want to chime in on that too. That is amazing, Scott. And it resonated with me. I mean, we had an ice cream social and we had them in different pockets of the city at the same time. And we just gave out ice cream. I mean, community is power. And I'm telling you guys, Saturday, when you really see everybody, everybody's gonna, now tomorrow, I'll be at the library, somebody else, you know, the peers will be at the library, we'll be giving out the swag bags, somebody else will be at another location. But when we all come together that Saturday, and everyone you've been talking with, networking with throughout the whole summit, come together and meet each other face to face, long-lasting relationships are built, communities are joined. You figure out what organization, breaking down the silos. So you have two organizations that's doing the same thing in the community, to be able to come together and say, guess what? We were always on the same mission. Now, because of Healing City, we're all on the same mission together. It's amazing. It's great work that's being done. Ooh, sorry.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we have about 4 minutes and we have a question from Elaine that I would like to get into the dialogue, and it's probably for our elected members, although anyone can certainly weigh in. And the question is, there are Baltimore City boards, so boards and commissions we know are powerful tools out sort of the appointed side of government, that seem to be immune and removed from the elected officials' standard of listening to the community and pursuing equitable solutions. So for example, the zoning board in Baltimore recently approved a crematorium in the middle of a Black neighborhood that would have never flown in a white one. The school board ordered school closures when the mayor sent a letter specifically asking for them to refrain. The established system keeps fighting back. How do elected officials and community members get through to other layers of local government? Is participatory budgeting a mechanism to do that? Or what power and tools do you use to push back when government is not all working together in the interest of community? And I'm going to ask everyone to maybe give like their 45-second response to that. Oh, Donna, you want to get in, Donna? No, Donna does not want to get in.
No, I stay in my lane. I know my lane. Y'all have fun with that. Great question, Evan.
Yeah, invite anyone who would like to come into the conversation on that one. I know it's not an easy question.
Well, I will say that here in Seattle, this is a huge issue. Whether we're talking about design review boards or any number of entities that are separate jurisdictions. We as a council will sometimes send letters, really push. If we have some sort of budget authority that might be able to influence something, we try to use that as well. But it really is part of the community organizing to try to get outside pressure. The other thing that we do as a city, although this really affects our departments more than different jurisdictions, is we do have a race and social justice toolkit. Our city departments are supposed to use that to sort of inform their decisions. It's not quite trauma informed, but it is looking at what the impacts and outcomes are, particularly on communities of color. And so it's a tough nut to crack. I'll just say that.
I'm gonna jump in. It is a very difficult nut to crack, but it also gives us an opportunity as elected officials to do things differently that have been done over the years. Cincinnati right now is going through a zoning legislation right now that's going to make some people upset and uncomfortable, but we have to be willing to do the right thing for the right reason and be willing to do things differently than they haven't been done previously. So it is difficult, but the biggest thing with this is if we're going to move the needle, and I use that term a lot, in the cities we represent, then sometimes we just have to do things a lot differently than they have been done. And this zoning ordinance in Cincinnati is going to be a tough one.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I'll just add, just like the message, like if you want change, run for local office, it applies to running for these boards and commissions. You know, there's often times where people are stepping off and, you know, they're asking for recommendations and you're scrambling to try and figure out who might fill that spot. But, you know, we need to be thinking about a pipeline for these folks too. And then also, you know, as an elected official, building relationships with people and other layers of government and on the boards of commissions, because sometimes you can get to them on that personal level when you have that relationship, where just as, you know, council member, whoever, you know, even though we may have that position, it doesn't really matter. So that's what I found can be effective.
Yeah, great point about the boards and commissions. We all should be thinking about how we lobby mayors or other county executives or whatever to get more people onto boards and commissions. That can be a powerful tool. So appreciate that point. So I know there's a couple of questions in the chat we didn't get to, so I apologize for that, but I think we are at time. Thank you to everyone on this panel for sharing your work, more importantly, for the work that you do every day in your communities. I think it's now, and just thank you to everyone for listening. And I actually don't know, I'm turning back over to Zeke, so I see him on the screen. Thank you all, and good to be with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much to my colleagues in other cities. Appreciate you all. Thank you to Elizabeth for doing a phenomenal job moderating that panel. Really, really, really appreciate you. Also want to just shout out and thank Open Society Foundation for the ongoing partnership and for really putting this day together in partnership with us, and just being just a great advocate. Also, like Elizabeth, I think, or Tammy might have said, want to thank Local Progress, just a true pipeline of progressive talent, folks who are willing to do the hard work and make often difficult decisions on behalf of constituents who've been historically left behind. And then I want to thank all the folks from Healing City. Everybody has been amazing throughout this week. Wonderful, wonderful panels today. Just inspiring, so much love. And I got to say that when Karen and I were scheming and dreaming of this thing, you know, we couldn't have asked for better. I really feel like for our cities to move forward, we have to do so together, and we have to learn from each other, and we have to support each other. And none of us has like all the answers, but I think collectively we can really get there. And that means working at the government level, that means working at the advocacy level, that means working in community, amazing folks like Donna, and that means us being able to have a conversation with each other. Finally, I also want to really thank the folks who are behind the scenes making this happen. Too often they don't get enough of the credit, but if they were not here, this would have been a mess. So Iris Showerman has been running the tech for Healing City all week long, and she has done an absolutely outstanding job of it, and I am so deeply grateful. Similar to Nick Mackel, excellent work behind the scenes. Jen, Evan Serpic, and all the folks who are doing the heavy lifting and are not always on the camera, but believe me, they are instrumental to what we're able to get done. So again, just want to thank everybody. This has really been an inspiring morning and afternoon. I feel recharged and recalled to the work. And I just want to, again, in the humblest way possible, say that I really feel like we're at a moment where democracy is under real duress. You know, it is no joke that we almost had an election get stolen a couple of years ago, and then we had an insurrection at our Capitol, and we may see it again. And we've seen a rise of fascism and authoritarianism in the United States and across the globe. And so to me, the answer, the anecdote or the antidote, the only thing we have is each other and our ability to lean on each other and support each other and work together as cities, as communities. So again, it is just really, really, really been great. Love all of y'all who've participated, and looking forward to being at the Penn North branch of Enoch Pratt tomorrow. Can't wait. See y'all soon.